All right, welcome back to the deep dive.
Yeah.
This time we're diving deep on someone, well, you could call him both a tech genius and a complete madman.
Oh, yeah.
John McAfee, the brains behind McAfee Antivirus.
Yes.
Buckle up because this deep dive takes us everywhere, from early computer viruses to a jungle hideout in Belize,
Wow.
even to a Spanish prison cell.
It's quite the story.
It is. You sent over some excerpts from the YouTube video, The Craziest Story You've Ever Heard, by Magnates Media. And let me tell you, it lives up to the title.
It really does. You know, what's fascinating to me about this story is that it isn't just a tech bio. It's almost like a cautionary tale about success, paranoia, the dark side of innovation.
Right. So let's rewind to the beginning. The video touches on his pretty rough childhood. His father committed suicide when he was only 15. Do you think that kind of early trauma could have played a role in the way his life unfolded?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Early trauma like that can really have a lasting impact. It often shapes how people see the world, relationships, even their risk-taking behavior. It's a factor worth considering when you look at the trajectory of McAfee's life.
And it makes that contrast between his troubled past and his early success even more striking.
Yeah.
The guy worked on the Apollo program at NASA.
I mean,
That seems like a far cry from the headlines he made later on.
it really does. But even during his time at NASA, there were hints of a more turbulent personality.
Okay.
The sources mentioned his struggles with substance abuse,
Right.
even using LSD on his way to work.
Wow.
So, I mean, it's clear that McAfee was brilliant, but also deeply troubled.
Okay, so how does this brilliant, troubled mind go from NASA to revolutionizing the way we think about computer security?
Well, the late 1980s saw the rise of the first computer viruses.
Right.
And McAfee saw both a threat and an opportunity when he encountered the brain virus, one of the first to spread widely. He knew he had to create a solution.
Yeah.
That's how McAfee Antivirus was born.
I remember those early days of the internet.
Oh, yeah.
Everyone was terrified of these mysterious computer viruses.
Exactly. And McAfee was a master at tapping into that fear. You know, his marketing for VirusScan was brilliant.
Yeah.
But it also played on people's anxieties. He went on news channels warning about the devastating impact these viruses could have,
Right.
potentially wiping out entire systems. It was a shrewd tactic
Yeah.
that cemented his position as a cybersecurity pioneer.
The Michelangelo virus scare is a perfect example.
Oh, yeah.
He really capitalized on that, didn't he?
Oh, yeah.
Can you explain a little more about how that played out?
So the Michelangelo virus was designed to overwrite a computer's hard drive on Michelangelo's birthday,
Okay.
March 6th.
Right.
McAfee predicted that millions of computers would be affected. In reality, the damage was far less widespread. Some critics accused him of deliberately exaggerating the threat to drive sales of his antivirus software.
So was he a visionary protecting us from digital threats, or a savvy businessman exploiting our fears?
That's the question, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's one that will continue to top up as we go deeper into his story.
Yeah.
The lines between genius, opportunism, and manipulation can get pretty blurry with someone like McAfee.
All right, so McAfee Antivirus becomes a household name. He's making millions.
Right.
What happens next? He rides off into the sunset and enjoys his fortune.
Not exactly. McAfee, he builds this incredibly unconventional, almost cult-like company culture at McAfee Associates. Think employees sleeping at their desks.
Oh, wow.
Wild parties and a blurring of lines between work and personal life. It was chaotic,
Right.
but it also seemed to breed a kind of intense creativity and work ethic.
Cult-like is a pretty strong word.
Yeah.
What was it actually like working at McAfee Associates?
So imagine a workplace fueled by long hours, fierce loyalty to McAfee, and a complete disregard for traditional corporate boundaries. There were even rumors of a group called the Little Foxes who were rewarded for, shall we say, inappropriate behavior.
Wow.
It was certainly a unique and some might say toxic environment.
Wow. And this all eventually leads to McAfee selling his company shares and becoming incredibly wealthy, right?
Yes, in 1994, he walks away with a cool $100 million.
Wow.
He's free from the corporate world. He's got money to burn.
Yeah.
And that's when things start to get really interesting.
So with all this money and freedom, where does he go? What does he do?
Well, he dives headfirst into a series of eccentric pursuits.
Okay.
He gets really into aerotrekking.
Aerotrekking.
Yeah, basically flying ultralight aircraft dangerously close to the ground.
Okay, what is that? What is that exactly?
So imagine a cross between hang gliding and flying a very small open cockpit plane. It's thrilling, but incredibly risky. And tragically, this hobby leads to the death of McAfee's nephew in a crash.
Oh, wow.
He had personally trained his nephew.
Right.
And that accident seems to have deeply impacted him, further fueling his anxieties and paranoia.
It's tragic, and it feels like this is a turning point in the story. Things start to take a darker turn from here on out, wouldn't you say?
Definitely. From here, McAfee's life becomes a roller coaster of legal troubles, international escapes,
Wow.
and increasingly erratic behavior.
All right, so let's follow this roller coaster ride. What happens after the aerotrekking tragedy? Where does McAfee go next?
Well, convinced that he's being targeted and threatened, McAfee decides to run.
Oh, wow.
He sets his sights on Belize, seeking a haven from his legal woes and perceived enemies.
Belize. That's a pretty dramatic move. It seems like he was going further and further off the grid.
It was a complete change of scenery. He builds this lavish compound in Belize,
Yeah.
starts dabbling in herbal antibiotic research, and surrounds himself with armed guards. Wow. He essentially creates his own little fiefdom, even imposing an 8 p.m. curfew on the entire village where he lived.
What a curfew for the whole village. That's pretty intense.
No.
Do you think he was trying to exert control over the community?
It definitely created tension with the locals. Some saw it as a way to reduce crime,
Okay.
but many felt he was overstepping his boundaries, using his wealth and influence to impose his will on the community.
And all of this is before we even get to the murder of his neighbor.
Right. This is just the setup, the simmering tension that eventually boils over into a very dark chapter of McAfee's life.
Okay, let's talk about that. What exactly happened between McAfee and his neighbor Greg Fall?
Well, Fall was an American expat who had retired to Belize seeking peace and quiet.
Okay.
But he soon found himself clashing with McAfee over his pack of dogs.
Yeah.
The dogs were reportedly aggressive, roaming freely, and even biting people on the beach.
Oh, wow. I can see how that would cause some friction.
Yeah, things escalated to the point where Fall threatened to poison the dogs
Oh, no.
if McAfee didn't get them under control. Shortly after that threat, McAfee's dogs were found poisoned.
Wow.
And the very next day, Greg Fall was found dead in his home with a gunshot wound to the head.
Wow, the timing of that is incredibly suspicious.
It is. And of course, McAfee immediately becomes the prime suspect.
Right.
But instead of cooperating with the police, he does what he does best. He runs.
He runs again. This guy was always on the move, wasn't he?
He was. But this time, he brings along a documentary crew
What?
from Vice News to document his escape.
Wow.
It was a classic McAfee move,
Yeah.
using the media to control the narrative and potentially protect himself. This escape from Belize is actually what became the Netflix documentary Running with the Devil.
Wow. So he's a fugitive. He's on the run.
Yeah.
And he's got a camera crew following him. What could possibly go wrong?
Well, you'd be surprised. Remember, McAfee had a talent for attracting chaos.
Yeah.
Even with a film crew in tow, he couldn't stay out of trouble for long.
All right. Before we get into that trouble, I want to go back to the murder investigation for a moment.
Okay.
Did McAfee ever offer a plausible explanation for Greg Fall's death?
He claimed to have nothing to do with it, spinning a wild tale about the Belizean government framing him
Oh, wow.
and trying to assassinate him because he had uncovered evidence of corruption.
It sounds pretty far-fetched. Was there any evidence to support his claims?
Not really. It was all very cloak and dagger, very spy novel.
Yeah.
But ultimately, there was no concrete evidence to back up his story. But then a Showtime documentary called Gringo: The Dangerous Life of John McAfee came out.
Okay.
And some of his former employees claimed he had hired hitmen in the past. It definitely painted a darker picture, suggesting he might have been capable of violence.
But then some of those same employees later recanted their their statements,
Yeah.
right? Saying they were paid by Showtime to lie.
Exactly. It's a tangled web of accusations, retractions, and conflicting accounts.
Yeah.
It's almost impossible to know what truly happened.
Right.
And that's part of what makes McAfee's story so captivating. It's a puzzle with missing pieces, a mystery without a clear solution.
So we've got this murder investigation hanging over McAfee's head. He's on the run in Belize with a camera crew.
Right.
And then, as if things couldn't get any crazier, the Vice reporters accidentally reveal his location.
Ah,
Right.
you got it. They published a photo online that had GPS coordinates embedded in the metadata.
Oh, wow.
So McAfee, who was supposed to be in hiding,
Right.
was suddenly exposed to the whole world.
Talk about a rookie mistake. What happened next? Did they catch him?
They did. He was arrested in Guatemala. But even in custody, he managed to pull off another stunt. Facing extradition back to Belize, he faked a heart attack to delay the process.
He faked a heart attack. I swear. This guy was like a real-life action movie character.
He was a master manipulator and showman right up until the end. But eventually, the Guatemalan authorities saw through his act and deported him back to the United States.
So he's back in the U.S., a free man, despite being wanted for questioning in a murder investigation in Belize. Did he just get away with it?
It's a question that hangs over this entire chapter of his life.
Yeah.
He was never charged in connection with Greg Fall's death and managed to slip through the cracks of the legal system. But the cloud of suspicion and unanswered questions remained.
And what happens when he gets back to the U.S.? Does he try to lay low, maybe live a quieter life?
Are you kidding? This is John McAfee we're talking about. Quietly fading into the background was never a part of his plan.
All right, so what does McAfee 2.0 look like?
Picture this. He's on YouTube, ranting about the government, snorting bath salts, surrounded by women, even hacking into people's computers on camera.
What?
It's like he leaned into the crazy genius persona that the media had created for him.
It sounds completely wild. Was he trying to reclaim his fame, or was he genuinely unraveling?
It's hard to say. Maybe it was a bit of both. He clearly craved attention, but there was also a darkness there, a sense that he was losing control.
And he even tries his hand at politics during this time.
He does. In 2016, he runs for president of the United States.
What?
It was a long shot bid fueled by ego, libertarian ideals, and a desire to disrupt the system. Of course, he didn't win.
Right.
But it was another example of McAfee's relentless pursuit of the spotlight.
And then there's his foray into the world of cryptocurrency. I feel like that was a big part of his later years.
Absolutely. McAfee becomes a vocal advocate for cryptocurrencies, promoting various coins on Twitter.
Claiming to have made millions.
Yeah.
But he's also accused of some shady practices.
Oh.
Like pump and dump schemes.
Right.
Artificially inflating the price of a coin and then selling it for a profit at the expense of other investors.
Right.
You know.
So even as he's railing against the establishment and promoting this decentralized financial system,
right.
He's still finding ways to exploit the system for personal gain.
Yes.
Classic McAfee.
It's a pattern we see throughout his life.
But all good things must come to an end, right?
You could say that. Eventually, McAfee's luck runs out. The IRS, who he had been publicly mocking for years, catches up with him. They're after him for tax evasion.
Yeah.
And this time, there's no escape.
Which leads us to his arrest in Spain.
Yes.
And his eventual death in prison.
Yes, and even in death, McAfee leaves behind a trail of unanswered questions and conspiracy theories. Okay, so let's dive into that final chapter. What happened in those last days?
Well, picture this. He's in a Spanish prison fighting extradition to the U.S. on those tax evasion charges. He's 75 years old at this point.
Right.
And you have to imagine the weight of his past, all those years on the run.
Yeah.
All those accusations must have been heavy.
Yeah, I mean, he had always painted himself as this anti-establishment figure.
Right.
A rebel fighting against the system. It must have been a bitter pill to swallow.
Yeah.
Facing serious jail time in the U.S.
It was. And then just hours after a Spanish court approves his extradition, McAfee is found dead in his cell. Officially, it's ruled a suicide by hanging.
Right.
But of course, with a life as wild and controversial as McAfee's, the rumors started flying almost immediately.
I mean, it's not hard to see why McAfee had spent years cultivating this image of himself as a target.
Right.
Someone with powerful enemies. He even had that whacked tattoo, almost like he was predicting his own demise.
And let's not forget that tweet from years earlier.
Oh, right.
Where he said if he were ever found dead by suicide, it wouldn't be the real story. It's almost as if he was laying the groundwork for a posthumous conspiracy theory.
And then there's that mysterious Q post on his Instagram account shortly after his death.
Yes.
It was something out of a cryptic puzzle. What was that all about?
Honestly, nobody knows for sure. The post was quickly deleted, and there was never an official explanation. Some people saw it as a clue, a message from beyond the grave, further fueling the speculation that McAfee's death wasn't what it seemed.
It definitely added another layer of intrigue to an already incredibly complicated story.
Yeah.
And then there's the theory put forward by one of his ex-girlfriends in that Netflix documentary,
Right.
claiming that he faked his own death, and it's actually still alive somewhere.
Right. It's a wild theory.
It is.
The kind that flourishes in the absence of clear answers.
Right.
I mean, wouldn't it be a fitting end to the John McAfee saga?
It would.
The ultimate escape artist vanishing into thin air with a fortune in cryptocurrency?
It's almost like a digital age El Dorado.
Yeah.
This idea of McAfee hiding out, outsmarting the authorities one last time.
Right.
But realistically, do you think there's any truth to those claims?
While it's a captivating story, there's no evidence to support it. I think it's important to remember that beyond the headlines,
Right.
beyond the wild escapades and conspiracy theories, there's a real human tragedy at the heart of McAfee's story. A man who despite his brilliance and success was ultimately consumed by his own demons.
It's a reminder that even the most extraordinary lives are full of contradictions, complexities, and ultimately vulnerabilities. So as we reach the end of this deep dive into John McAfee's life, what do you think is the main takeaway for our listener? What can we learn from this roller coaster ride of a story?
I think it's a story that speaks to the dangers of unchecked power, wealth, and paranoia.
Right.
McAfee was a pioneer in cybersecurity, a visionary who helped shape the digital world we live in today. But he was also deeply flawed, prone to reckless decisions and actions that ultimately hurt himself and those around him.
He was a walking paradox, wasn't he? A tech genius who embraced fringe theories.
Right.
A self-proclaimed libertarian who sought control over others, a man who craved both attention and anonymity.
Exactly. He was a puzzle we may never fully solve.
Yeah.
And maybe that's what continues to fascinate us,
Yeah.
this idea that even in a world of data and information, some mysteries are simply meant to remain unsolved.
It's a story that forces us to confront the complexities of human nature.
Yeah.
The blurry lines between genius and madness.
Right.
And the idea that truth can be a slippery thing, especially in the digital age.
And while the full truth behind John McAfee's life and death may remain elusive, I think there's one thing we can say for certain. He left an undeniable mark on the world, both for better and for worse.
Well said. And that brings us to the end of our deep dive into the wild world of John McAfee. It's been quite a journey.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us. And until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep. It's interesting how McAfee's story kind of captures that collision between the tech world and the real world.
Yeah.
You know, he straddled both and yet never seemed to fully belong in either.
It's true. He was this pioneer in cybersecurity, but he was also this larger than life figure,
Right.
almost a caricature of the eccentric tech millionaire.
Right.
You know, it's like he was constantly pushing the boundaries, testing the limits of what was acceptable.
And he definitely seemed to revel in that role, playing the media, manipulating perceptions.
Oh, yeah.
But beneath all the bravado and outlandishness, do you think there was a genuine desire to make a difference, leave a positive mark on the world?
I think it's hard to say for certain.
Yeah.
You know, there were glimpses of it, like his work on herbal antibiotics,
Right.
and his advocacy for privacy and freedom in the digital age.
Right.
But his methods were often questionable,
Yeah.
his motives sometimes murky.
It's that constant push and pull between his brilliance and his recklessness that makes his story so compelling.
Yeah.
But as we wrap up this deep dive,
Right.
what do you think is the most important thing for our listener to remember
Yeah.
about John McAfee?
I think it's the importance of critical thinking,
Yeah.
of looking beyond the surface and questioning the narratives we're presented with. McAfee's life was a masterclass in misinformation, manipulation,
Yeah.
and self-promotion. He was a brilliant storyteller.
Yeah.
But it was often hard to separate fact from fiction.
Especially in today's world with the rise of social media and the constant bombardment of information.
Absolutely.
It's more crucial than ever
Yeah.
to be discerning consumers of information.
Yes.
To ask questions.
Yeah.
To challenge assumptions and to form our own conclusions.
Exactly. And I think that's the real legacy of John McAfee,
Yeah.
He may not have intended it,
Right.
but his life serves as a powerful reminder that we all have a responsibility to be critical thinkers, to engage with the world around us with a healthy dose of skepticism and a willingness to dig deeper.
Well said. And that brings us to the end of our deep dive into the world of John McAfee.
Yeah.
It's been a wild ride full of twists and turns and more than a few unanswered questions. We hope you enjoyed the journey and that it sparks some thought-provoking conversations. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.